Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I noticed the tone of your intro was just a little bit more upbeat than usual. And I think I know why, because we just got finished watching the Big Ten Network campus tour visit at Ohio State. And those are always, I feel like we need to, before we even dive into this, like we're going to be talking about like, oh, what did we see? What do we hear during this thing? This is the most perpetually upbeat show that is ever out there. Like, go back and watch the 2019 Big Ten Network preseason campus tour at Rutgers, where Rutgers is about to have the Georgia Tech 222 to Cumberland 0 of seasons. And I bet it's like, I don't know, Chris Ash might have things rolling here in Piscataway. I don't know. So I think we need to just sort of like, before we get into anything, just say like, look, we get it. We get it. This is a network that is trying to sell you Big Ten Network football or Big Ten football. You should watch it this fall. So, like, we get it. But also, all the stuff we're about to say.
Yeah, I do remember a few years back at the Ozone when the Big Ten Network got in there and we weren't allowed in there. And I just wrote the most passive aggressive, not very passive, aggressive complaint piece, writing up a practice report by what they were showing us and telling us. And I would include all of the players' names that they got wrong and be like, he must be a transfer. He must be new. I've never heard of this guy. Just a really whiny piece of literature for anybody. And, but I'm so much more mature than that now, Tom. We were not at this practice that the Big Ten Network had to go to, which is fine. We've been to a few and we'll hear more about others. But what did we learn from today's viewing of the Big Ten Network? At least in terms of, I'll tell you what I've learned. This is based on what we saw, little clips of what we saw, and also what some of the stuff that Ohio State has posted. Is it still very much looks like it's Ian Moore at left tackle and Austin Siereveld at right guard. We even saw Ian Moore and Luke Montgomery on the practice there working in tandem on a block. And so everything we continue to see and hear seems like if it's not a done deal yet, it's just they're just I don't know, maybe they've set a deadline and it's like, yeah, we already know, but we'll go ahead and wait until the deadline to see if anything changes.
Yeah, between what you've seen on Big Ten Network, obviously what we've been hearing, and basically what we've been telling you for weeks and weeks now. And even when you look at what Ohio State puts out on Instagram, it's like, oh, well, there's Austin Siereveld somewhere on the interior of the offensive line. Yet again, fascinating. And everything is pointing in the same direction. Everything is pointing in the same direction that we have been pointing you in since, I mean, even coming out of spring, we were sort of thinking, yeah, this feels like where this is trending. And I don't think we've changed our answer on that at any point during this whole process. There was a question, when Josh Pia comes back and Josh Pia can play, can he win that spot? It feels like probably not. I mean, there was a quote from Arthur Smith that I saw you put on Twitter, I think, where it was Arthur Smith talking about, sometimes your third tackle is is playing guard for you. And it's like, yes, well, who might that be? He didn't put a name on it. So it's a stone cold stumper.
Nobody knows. But getting to some, I guess maybe the more some of the other interesting stuff was for the interviews they talked with Matt Patricia and Arthur Smith and Ryan Day. And with Patricia, he said it's taken longer for him this year to figure out what everybody can do, which is interesting because he's been around longer and he knows most of the players. Whereas last year he comes into the winter and he said, by the end of spring, I pretty much had everybody pegged in terms of what they could do. And it helps when you've got all of the NFL talent that he had, NFL ready talent that he had last year. But this year, taking a little bit longer and not in a bad way. It's just, I think there are more players that are going to play. And so, yeah, you've got to figure like, well, I want to get all four of those linebackers on the field. So how do we do that? And I think that's where it's still taking some time to finish those things up. And he said this year, the quote was more platoon type is how he said it in terms of, packages and getting guys out on the field.
Well, I think last year, what can these guys do? you had a bunch of guys last year where the answer is literally everything, better than anyone has ever done it at Ohio State. And this year, you don't necessarily have the luxury of two complete freakazoid linebackers who are going to go on the top 7 of the NFL draft and a complete historical outlier at safety who is already like making waves in the NFL because he's such an immediate impact player there. And, you don't have the Caden McDonald, who's the best nose tackle they've had at Ohio State in, I don't know how long, but a long time. You have the pieces. They have, I think, kind of a normally good Ohio State defense. Like the typical standard of Ohio State defense is what he's got this year. He doesn't have the historical outlier of an Ohio State defense that he had last year. So between that and the fact that, we keep talking about 51 new players on this year's team, about half of those guys are on defense, give or take. So there's a bunch of new players that you're sort of figuring out. And you don't have people who are, the enormous guys who also can run with receivers in space at linebacker, but who also can plug the hole like a defensive end, who are also kind of defensive end size. You don't have the guys who are like all of those things all at once. So, all right, so now you got to sort of piece and part together your linebacker core a little bit. It just feels like there's going to be a lot situationally on defense where, okay, you're going to have your nickel. You're probably going to have your big nickel. You're going to have your 4-3. You're going to have guys, you have different, packages and groups of, you're going to have different answers to all the questions. It can't just be the same basic answer, the same basic group of guys that can just kind of, they can just do everything. So, it takes a little longer to get there. I don't think that changes my opinion that they have answers for everything on this defense. There's more answers than there were last year.
Yeah, and more questions, more answers, but maybe more answers for each of the questions, because last year the answers are very succinct and correct. This year, maybe there's some nuance to the questions and some nuance to the answers. He did say they've got a lot of depth up front, and that defense they would build throughout the season in terms of what they wanted to do. You mentioned the nickel, big nickel and stuff like that. And when they were talking with Ryan Day, who kind of has spoiled one of our shows that we've got planned in terms of what he wants to see from the scrimmage on Saturday. We have not released that one yet, but everything that he said is basically what we talked about. And one of the last things he said is basically just figuring out that nickel safety corner situation in terms of that extra defender or what's it going to be. So I thought that still being like, I think they know who the nickel is. Well, who's the number 2 nickel? And is that Jermaine Matthews? Is that Miles Lockhart? Is that Simeon Caldwell? How do they want that to go? And I think with Day, that was just some of the things that he talked about where they just need to figure out all of the packages. That's what they want to get done. And as I said, very much stuff that we have talked about. So if that sort of stuff interests you, look for the next show in a couple of days, or maybe tomorrow, or maybe today, or it might even be on your phone right now. Subscribe to the show if you've not yet done so on the audio side. If you get into the podcast, YouTube, of course, youtube.com/@BuckeyeInsiders. But Day getting up there and talking about what he needed to see, anything that you take from that one?
Yeah, I think from Ryan Day's perspective, as you said, it's a lot of the stuff that we talked about. One thing that I thought was interesting was he talked about the younger running backs and who was going to take the next step. And, the position battles he listed were the offensive line, which we've sort of addressed that already, the younger running backs and who's going to take the next step, which he was pretty bullish on Bo Jackson not very long ago. He's been pretty bullish on Isaiah West. That felt a lot like, I'm not saying Legend Bay's right name right now, but I'm interested to see if Legend Bay is someone that, they feel they can trust coming out. Up front on defense, that's kind of the, who else is going to be on that defensive front? I think they feel okay in the interior spots. I think that's really up front on defense. It's going to be Kenyatta Jackson. You get the sense it's going to be Beau Atkinson, but who else do they feel is ready to go? Who's ready to be in that rotation up front on defense? That I think is a big one. We already talked about the nickel and safety and corner, 4 to 5 groups, but he said it's the personnel groupings, the right packages on defense when it's third down, when it's short yardage. It's all the sort of stuff that we're talking about here, where there is not just one solid answer where it's just, Arvell Reese and Sunny Style, they're just on the field. They're on the field all the time. And you're sort of figuring out, okay, what is Christian Allegro's role and where does Riley Pettyjohn fit in there? And you figure Peyton Pierce is going to be in there quite a bit, but where do these different guys, and then when does Jay Timmons go on the field? When does Jay Timmons come off the field? And when he does, who goes on in his place? Like, that's the kind of stuff they're trying to find out, which, you're 2 weeks away at this point from the first game. So that's a lot. This is important stuff that you do have to get sorted out, but also there are probably about 128 or 130 other teams that are dealing with, they're grappling with much bigger questions right now than what Ryan Day's talking about.
Yeah, some teams are looking at film of NFL players that are about to be cut to see if they can bring them in through the transfer portal. And I don't know that Ohio State's doing much of that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was I talked with Luke Montgomery and Carson Hinzman and also Kenyatta Jackson. Luke was they're both kind of asked about Arthur Smith and what he's brought. And Luke Montgomery said, man, it's great. And then Kenyatta Jackson was asked about the offensive line. He said it's night and day from last year. And then he said it's different. And that's some of the things that we've been saying in terms of they want to be more aggressive this year in the offensive line. They feel that they will be. And so the attitude is there, and the physicality and just the everything you want from a group that is going to push the line of scrimmage. It seems like they believe they're going to be able to do it. And the way that the offense has been operating against the defense, Kenyatta Jackson is saying, it's night and day from last year. And they were pretty good last year.
They were pretty good last year. But the theme that was sort of developing throughout the show, and this is the theme that this is not anything new to the Ohio State fan base. This is the stuff that the Ohio State fan base has been concerned about since about the Big Ten championship game last year, is, hey, short yardage, hey, goal line, here, that kind of stuff. The offensive line has heard your concerns. They are recognized. You have been heard. They are working to address them right now. And I think everything that we have heard going back to the spring has been they're figuring out who the best five is on the offensive line. You have not heard any concern about, oh boy, I don't know if we've got a best five on the offensive line. You're not hearing that. It is just, who's the best five among these good options, among these multiple good options? Who is the best five there? And Carson Hinzman and Luke Montgomery were when they brought those two guys out, I went, okay, yeah, those are two good guys to put on the TV together. They'll give you some, they'll give you a little bit of personality, but those are also guys who they have over the years, they have heard your criticism. It has registered. They recognize that, they have also seen the film from the Miami game. They recognize what that was, and they recognize that they did not get to finish their season the way they wanted to as a result of that. And I think because of those guys being back, because of all the other, because of the other depth that they have in there, but also because of the Arthur Smith factor, I think he's going to put those guys in a better place than they were put in a lot of ways last year. Plus you have better guys there. The offensive line, we'll see what it looks like in Austin. We may walk out of DKR and go, well, we were wrong about that. It's possible. But until I see something that looks like the end of last year, that feels like this is probably a concern that is, this is probably a concern that has been addressed.
Yeah. And Ryan Day was asked about those two games last year in the postseason, and he kind of bristled and pushed back a little bit. They were actually pretty good, except for some moments. And it's like, well, that's really, that's the problem.
How many bad moments did you need to have to not be getting on a plane to Phoenix after that?
Right. And so he said this year, they need to be able to run the ball and stop the run in the fourth quarter. And you're talking about, we'll see against Texas and we'll know then. It's like, well, that may be the best team that they face, but that's also the point where you want to see the offensive line operate against the best teams they face. And that's been a question mark for them. So yes, we'll know for sure if they do it. We'll know for sure. If they don't, it's like, well, it's week 2. They've got time. So there you go. Some of the thoughts that we have from the Big Ten Network show. If you guys watch it, go ahead and do your thoughts in the comments. We'll check those out. Hit the thumbs up if you've not yet done so. 5-star rating and review, as you know. And of course, you can find us at BuckeyeInsiders.com talking about this, talking about camp, talking about Ball State, Texas coming up. The season is almost here, and we'll have some intel probably. I'll promise you we'll have something from Saturday scrimmage as well. So if you want to sign up, get ahead of the curve. Would love to see you there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.